The word haram stems from the Arabic haram or harim, meaning sacred and forbidden. Principally aimed at holding the royal womenfolk away from prying eyes, the Imperial Harem of the Ottoman Empire grew into a gilded cage where women were trained and raised to serve the royal purpose. The harem was populated with the Sultan's mother, wives, other female relatives, concubines, and slaves. They were zealously guarded by eunuchs. In the course of time, as we shall see later, the residents of the harem started moving beyond their homely duties of producing heirs and moved closer to the seat of power. Exquisitely beautiful, harems were physically spots of idol in the palace, set apart from the rest of the palace by complex designs which made contact with the world outside difficult. There was nothing wanting in the way of worldly pleasures. The architecture and gardens were unparalleled in beauty. From a modern perspective, though, this was nothing short of a golden cage housing birds with clipped wings. The women residing within had only one purpose: to serve the Sultan on the throne. The life in the harem was thus designed to this end. They offered the requisite female influence in the lives of the Sultan in terms of emotional attachments, social standing, and the securing of the future of the throne. Hierarchy within a harem. The women occupying the harem followed a distinct hierarchy. The establishment was rallied around the Valide Sultan, in other words, the mother of the reigning Sultan. This matriarchal setup was tied to the longevity of the Sultan himself. His death would spell the end of the dominion of the Valide Sultan in the harem, and she would be secluded. The other women in the harem served the Valide Sultan, and her observations about them decided their fate. She selected the appropriate concubines for the Sultan, her son. The second best were married off to the court nobilities. The lacking and belligerent were punished either by being left penniless and without a visible prospect, or by summary execution in some cases. This centralization of power meant that the women usually tried to cozy up to the Valide Sultan so as to survive comfortably and further their personal, and in some cases, political ambitions. The next in line was the first wife of the Sultan, Haseki Sultan, the one who bore him maximum sons. This was followed by Haseki Kadin, the wife who bore daughters. The Sultan was allowed to have only 4 of these. While the Valide Sultan and Haseki Sultan lost much of their powers upon the death of the ruler, the Haseki Kadin could remarry upon the demise of the Sultan. The next in line was the Hasodalik or the Iqbal, meaning the fortunate girl. These were basically the Sultan's mistresses. They were known to be beautiful and talented. Their prominence and position were validated by the Valide Sultan and the Haseki Sultan. Often, these women were given away as gifts to visiting men worthy of being honored. This stratum was followed by the Gozde or Gedik. These were young female graduates of the harem school who had caught the eye of the Sultan for their beauty and intelligence. If they pleased the Sultan enough and bore him daughters or sons, they could be promoted up the pyramid and paid more. There was no hard and fast rule regarding the accession of these women. The only requisite was to be able to be spotted by the Sultan. The students of the harem school constituted the next layer of residents. Known as the Shagird, they were educated in music, dancing, poetry, love, and religion. If they graduated, they learned to read, write, and narrate stories, a very important aspect of this civilization. If they failed to fare well, they could be married off to less eligible men, relatively less brilliant students of the palace school, rather than being promoted to the level of a Gedik. The last stratum was comprised of servants and guards of the harem. The harem was guarded night and day by eunuchs who had been purchased from Ethiopia or Sudan or claimed as spoils of war. Originally, the harem and the palace school, where the elite young boys received their training, were guarded by the same community of white eunuchs. However, the black eunuchs were solely tasked with stringently defending the harem. Many of them often rose up the ranks in the Sultan's army. The zealous guarding of the harem was evidence of the extreme privacy that this establishment demanded in the Ottoman Empire. How were the women treated within the harem? Contrary to the popular belief regarding the use of harem women as slaves for sexual contentment alone, education in various forms was an inherent part of the life of women in a harem. Looks were hardly ever dimmed enough. Women and girls who had been captured from lands as far as Russia, Iran, and Greece were required to undergo training in basic literacy, including mathematics and religion. Besides, they were taught the more qualitative aspects of sophistication and presentation. They learned to embroider, sing, and dance. In that sense, the harem functioned as a starting and finishing school for young girls so that they could grow up in a way that made it easier for them to find their position in the royal society. Freedom was, however, all a matter of perspective. These women were effectively imprisoned within the golden cage of the palace, disallowed from stepping out in the city below. But there was hardly anything lacking within the premises. Equipped with the highest standards of luxury and aesthetic decorations, the harems were incredibly soothing and offered a reflective mood. It was an ideal place for the Sultan to retire in and relax in the company of charming, intelligent women and exquisite surroundings. In some sense of the word, only the Sultan's wives were free, while all others were bound in some or the other form, somehow linked to the ruler's proclivities. In the obvious absence of free will, the prospects of these women were usually measured in terms of marriage and hinged almost completely on their ability to appease the Sultan. Those who succeeded were rewarded copiously. Besides monetary benefits, they were given living quarters, slaves, eunuchs, in addition to the unlimited affections of the Sultan. This usually meant that clothing and jewelry flowed for the fortunate few. The ruling sultanate of women. The women of the harem were far from dull. With time, they started influencing the political fabric of the Ottoman Empire. This began with the time of Roxalina, otherwise known as Hurrem Sultan, Hurrem meaning cheerful in Persian, when she and her entourage moved to the Seraglio from the old palace. As the utter favorite of the Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, she was a close confidant to the Sultan in matters of both household and state affairs. Though never proved concretely, Hurrem Sultan is credited with several political maneuvers, which, as argued by some historians, may have played some role in the eventual decline of the Ottoman Empire. Qasim Sultan, the second Sultan of Sultan Ahmed I, was another influential figure in the Ottoman Empire. Of Greek origin, Qasim Sultana first came to power when her husband ruled, but after his untimely death, she had to retreat to the old palace as mandated by the code. Subsequently, however, she returned as a valide sultan as the mother of her minor son Murad IV. Given that he was still not of age, Qasim stayed on as an official regent. It is said that she effectively ruled the kingdom through her son during the latter's reign. The last in line of this rule of women was Naqshidil Sultan, who was the valide sultan to Mahmud II. The Imperial Ottoman Harem was not what the West easily assumes, a mass of women that the Sultan imprisoned for his pleasure. Quite opposite to that, only a few women were in fact deemed fit for association with the ruler. This decision was primarily left to the Valide Sultan and to a less extent to the Haseki Sultan. The ultimate aim was to secure the future of the Sultanate. The code of the harem was almost strict, but more often than not, the affections of the ruling sultan overruled these norms. The harem functioned more as a center of learning for the womenfolk, many of whom had been captured as slaves during conquest or may simply have been bought. With the right kind of education and grace, some of them proceeded to positions of considerable influence, Hurrem Sultan herself being a sterling example of this. Their eventual proximity to the decision-making center of the Ottoman Empire was coincidental and led to their increased participation in the state affairs of the empire. While it can be argued that their meddling may have brought about the ultimate demise of the Ottoman Empire, their rise and influence are noteworthy.